What source of information supports the blind sight's visually guided behaviors after V1 lesions? So just to remind you, blind sight behaviors are supported by non-visual pathway. That's the sort of the upshot of this video. Anatomically defined visual hierarchy is just one way to characterize the visual system. And in fact, there exists multiple visual pathways, and that's also actually the rule rather than exception all over the brain. As I said, this Feldman and Van Nessen diagram suggests that V1 lesion should block all visual pathways, but actually there's an alternative pathway. So here's the monkey brain, looked from the lateral side here, and this is a medial side. It's after the section in the middle, and then looking from the sort of inside, okay? And then after that, if you kind of, unfold the folding of the monkey cortex, then what you see is that physically, it goes, the axons can be visualized to be connected from retina to LGN, and then V1, like this, all these, axons, and then that is connected to V2, V4, and IT, and so on. Okay. However, if you are astute, you might have noticed that there is something here called speria colliculus and pulvinar. And if we look at it more carefully, so here's the axons from retina to LGN and to V1. But there's a branch that goes into this small thing called speria colliculus, and that goes into pulvinar. And in fact, retinal ganglion cells do not always project to our lateral geniculate nucleus of thalamus, LGN, okay? And it's roughly only 90% that goes there. And then 10% is said to be connecting to speria colliculus. So that's this, structure, tiny structure. So what is the significance of this connection? That's the question. This alternative pathway can be considered like this way. So retina sends main output into the LGN, but it also bypasses lots of things to speria colliculus to pulvinar. And one of the connections, suppose the connection is to go to the amygdala, for example. That's processes the stimulus related to dangers or feeling of fear. And if you go from LGN, V1, V2, V4, TO, TE, then it takes some time. But if you think about, sort of evolutionary advantageous kind of mechanism, then maybe even if the process itself can be coerced, it may be possible that there are some certain circumstances that, some kind of simple template matching to activate amygdala may be beneficial in survival. So that's a kind of one particular pathway from retina to amygdala. And the speria colliculus is in fact known for important in terms of eye movements and attention control. So it kind of makes sense that there is a separate pathway, one for recognition and conscious experience, and another one for controlling for sort of the rapid bodily movement and also deployment of the attention to enhance the survival. And this is an anatomical kind of schematic of where the speria colliculus is with respect to the LGN. So this is the eyes, and this is roughly sort of the brain, and in a horizontal slice like this way. So the left side of the eye, for example, projects to left side of the cortex, and then it branches into two ways. One going to LGN. Here in this figure, it's called a lateral geniculate body, but it's the same as a lateral geniculate nucleus, LGN. And then another branching thing goes into the middle of the brain, And then in the behind of the brainstem, there is a structure called superior colliculus, and that's here. And then the LGN sends the input into calcarein cortex or calcarein sulcus, or the same thing as B1, through these optic radiations. So that's the two pathways originating from the same part of the retina here. And the right side goes into the right hemisphere, but the right eye's left side here and the left eye's left side converges into the same LGN and the same superior colliculus. Okay, that comes up again in the later of this week's video. Both left and right eye can see the same thing on the left side or right side around the fixation. Sometimes you think that the left eye and the right eye sees different things, and somehow it's completely, different. Like right eye is seeing on the right side and the left eye is seeing on the left side, but that's not the case. Okay. So, and in fact, it's more confusing than the sort of superior colliculus LGN kind of picture, because anatomically speaking, retinal output, this is a retina, goes at least 10 different branching ways. And that, as I said, LGN receives 90% of the output from the retina in the end. So that's a really dominant. And the superior colliculus that branches out around here, that already receives a 10%, roughly 10%. So the rest of the very tiny fraction of the output from retina goes into rest of the at least 8 pathway: inferior pulvinar and pregeniculate nucleus, olivary nucleus, nucleus of the optic tract, and the medial or lateral or dorsal terminal accessory optic nerve nuclei, these 3 things, and super chiasmatic nucleus. And this one is something related to sleep arousal and sometimes highly well studied. But all these other 8 pathways, I'm not that familiar what the neurons are doing over there. But for our purpose of the conscious experience of the vision, probably LGN pathway is most useful or important to understand. And in contrast, it's also important to understand what the role of superior colliculus pathway is, because it's dominant and responsive to highly sophisticated behaviors that looks like almost like conscious behaviors. So in this video, I explained that blind sight occurs when the retinal LGN V1 pathway is damaged. However, retinal superior colliculus pulvinar cortex pathway or retinal LGN MT pathways are likely to be mediating blind sight's behavior, especially visually guided behaviors. So here comes a question which will be answered in a couple of weeks lecture. And that is that if superior colliculus is important for attentional orienting, as I mentioned briefly, then can blind sight patient actually direct attention to invisible objects? That is a potentially weird question to ask, but it will be critical to consider the relationship between attention and the consciousness in the later lecture. Okay.